Hey, hold on. There you are. You're sideways now.
Good morning.
There's Gene.
Hello, Jesse. Hello, David.
Hey, Gino. Hold on. Let me turn on my video while we're waiting here.
Nice.
Well,
Another nice piece of art.
Come on. My Zoom is not. Hold on, I'm trying to get this thing to rotate.
Oh, look at that. You got a tripod and
Yeah.
everything. That was a little peek behind the scenes.
That's how I'm holding this phone up, man.
How the sausage gets made over there at Nelson HQ.
That's right. Usually your screen rotates when I do it. Let's see what happens.
Jesse, how's the running going?
It's good. It's like I enjoy it because it gets me out most mornings, and like it's otherwise like I would be totally sedentary. My dad, my dad lives mostly in Spain right now, and he was saying that his like Apple Watch asked him if he was dead because they literally have not like you wanted to make sure that he was like still okay and alive because they hadn't even been going outside for the most part. It was like total lockdown. So
did it ask in Spanish?
Probably. I think that it's called a quarantina in España.
Okay.
Hold on, Dawn can't find the Zoom link. Hold on, let's see.
Man, we need her. She's like the main attraction with all that info.
Let's see if this works. Does this work?
David, one thing you could do is just lay sideways.
And
then it's fine.
Am I upside down for you guys?
You're not upside down. You're
90 degrees.
You're 90.
Dang it.
There you go. Perfect.
But why would it do that?
Why would it do that?
You're
Is my phone locked? Hold on.
I bet that's it. Didn't you go to tech?
Yeah.
Deanna says that to me all the time. She's like, you went to Georgia Tech? I'm like, yeah, let me call someone over there and have them help me.
Exactly.
Paul doesn't have the link either. How is this that nobody has the link here? Maybe I'll send it back out to the group real quick.
As you're doing that, Jesse, on the media thing.
Yes.
I think maybe if a presenter wants to say this is off the record, that might be better than having everything off the record, because then the media might not know what they can say for an entire hour.
So, wait, I like that approach. I think we just tell Paul that maybe he prefaces, he gives that.
Hey, Dawn.
Hi.
Yeah, because David, what you're saying, smart. Like, let's be aware. We don't want to like have them not report though.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're going to give out your high school locker combination.
I just wanted everyone to know the lay of the land. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's a good observation, and I like Gene's approach, where it's like, if you want something to be off the record, just say it before you say what you're going to say, and then otherwise, it's flattering to know they want to.
The truth is, I mean, the reporter that's on is Doug Sams with the Business Chronicle. I mean, he is super like friendly. You know what I mean? He's not like salacious looking for and making up. He's a pretty good reporter. So
all that trash talking you were going to do of Governor Kemp, you're not going to do that?
That's right. I'm backing off.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, one of our tenants though, who decided to close, when people were coughing on dollar bills and stuff, Governor Kemp like lauded them, like, hey, you're making the right decision, you know, blah, blah, blah. Then they turned around and slapped him in the face and said, well, it's because you haven't been strong enough that we're even in this situation. It was like, whoa. It was like literally the governor just said something nice about you and they couldn't even, they're like, nope, we're going after him.
He's governor's getting used to people doing that to him. President did it.
Well,
I'm resending the confirmation email to everybody that was registered real quick. I
had to register again.
That's weird because it shows that everybody.
Paul, how are you?
Good, and you?
Good.
Yeah.
So can you guys hear me?
Too many Mashburn shirts on this show.
Today's broadcast brought to you by Mashburn.
Costuming by.
We can hear you, Dawn.
You can. Okay, I'm just checking. Sorry, I had a mic problem yesterday. So.
Okay, good call. I had two people reach out that could not. They wanted me to resend the confirmation email, so I figured I would just send it to everybody.
So, Paul, we were discussing the whole media thing, and it seems like it might be a good idea that if a presenter wants something off the record, that they say it instead of a blanket, everything's off the record, so that if someone does feel like reporting on, you know, part of the call, they can. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's best as opposed to declaring the whole thing off the record. And to be honest with media, if you invite them, if you don't tell them in advance when you're inviting them that it's off the record, then it kind of pisses them off, you know. But if you say, you have to say it right up front and get that agreement before you actually ask them into the conversation, is the general way. I think Sam's is probably more amenable than that. But just the conversations I've had with you all, I didn't sense that there was anything terrifically, you know, sensational or controversial.
Maybe you should make some news, Gene. Like maybe you should really make some news today.
I plan to.
Good. I'm not going to start the broadcast until about 1 minute before now. I think that's probably the move here, so people don't see us.
Yeah, and then we're going to start on time, right?
Yes. And I will. I've got the polling ready to roll. I've got all the ones that you sent me, Paul.
Does someone want to text Lawrence and Janet?
I don't have their. I have Janet's cell. Let me see. I sent the email back out to everybody. I couldn't.
I might have Lawrence's.
Let's see what I've got. I might actually too. Let me see.
I talked to Janet this morning. She's on top of it, I think.
Okay.
I just texted Lawrence.
Okay, I'm texting Janet the link. So I've got those polls that you ran, Paul, and then I added one about MARTA, or public transportation. And then I also had some others about perceived risk. Gauging like how comfortable you would be with even just going to the grocery store or getting on a plane.
Yeah, I'll leave that to you, and I'll keep an eye on it. But okay. I was just trying to make sure that a few of the questions are actually like tied into the flow of the conversation.
I also had, do you know someone who's tested positive for coronavirus? I thought it would be interesting to know if people actually know somebody.
Yeah.
And also, have you or someone in your immediate family lost a job or taken a pay cut?
Those are good.
And those are, you can do those anonymously too. So
yeah,
I think I made all of the polls anonymous just because there's no.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a few that are like specific to our conversation and to this.
That's great. And then the
I didn't
Q&A.
see them. Is there one about like who's, ready to reopen?
I think there is something like
Sort of,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. And then, do you want me to do with the Q&A, Paul? How do you want me to make that smoothly? Or people ask questions in the Q&A, and there's certain times when somebody could just respond by writing to that person,
Yeah.
like Dawn did last time. And so if you see a question on Q&A and you are not talking and you think you can sidebar with that person for a minute and give them an answer there, that might help get some people's questions answered that we might not have time to get to.
I found
So
that really hard last time.
you did?
Yeah.
Okay. So then,
I can't do it. As a moderator, I can't do it. I mean, it's
Okay.
like, I've done these things with somebody talking in my ear, which is hard enough, but trying to read the poll and read the chat and keep up with the conversation.
so then maybe if we really do stick to that schedule of the first at 10:40, we look to see if we've got Q&A.
Yep.
Then that would give us 15 minutes, and then hopefully we could have 5 minutes where everyone has a final comment. But if not, like last time we ran out of time.
Can you take those questions, Jesse, within that chat function? And I've got it where I've broken out the windows this time where they're not all sitting on top of each other.
Yeah.
Which I think will make it easier for me and my pea brain. But can you forward those to just me and point out, like pick the questions?
Yeah, I will do that.
Forward those to me through the chat.
Okay. Yep. How's it going, Lawrence?
Pretty good.
We're missing
How are
Janet.
you guys?
Hello,
Doing
Lawrence.
well. Thanks for joining us again. I've texted Janet, so I was gonna go live almost right at 10.
So when you
Get
go
her
live,
What's that?
when you go live in like 30 seconds, we're just silent, right?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Can you do it?
Okay, here we go. I'm gonna turn off my video.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
All right, let's get going. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to The City in Which We Live, a Zoom webinar panel discussion about the impact of the global pandemic on architecture, design, construction, development, and commercial real estate and other related fields. It's a conversation about what this massive disruption will change about what we build and how we build it. This is the second of 3 episodes. Last week's episode, last Friday, focused on reflecting on the past 6 weeks in terms of what we had seen as the pandemic unfolded here in America. Today's episode is going to focus on the short-term future and the path to reopening and recovery and the challenges that specifically we're seeing in our fields and what our immediate priorities are. And then next Friday, our third and final episode, we're going to focus on the longer term future in terms of what are the big, deeper, more permanent changes that we anticipate seeing in what we build and how we build it. So I'm going to quickly reintroduce our panelists, and we're going to get right into the conversation today. Those of you that were on the call last week met them. But first, I want to ask you to use the chat function to tell us where you're connecting in from. And then later on, if you have questions that come to mind as the conversation goes along, please submit them. Jesse Altman from TVS Design is also going to be doing some polling along the way, so keep an eye out for that. And we had great participation on that last week, and it's really interesting information that we can pass along to you. Let me reintroduce our panelists and ask them to say hello. First is Dr. Dawn Haney, who is a professor of art and design at Georgia State University. She's also a researcher and a practicing designer. Good morning, Dawn.
Good morning.
Hey there. Next, we have David Nelson, who is a senior vice president at Carter USA. A lot of you know them right now from the work they're doing in Summer Hill and the Met. Morning, David.
Good morning.
Morning. We've got Gene Kansas from the Constellation Group. A lot of people know Gene. Gene, how are you?
Good morning. Happy May Day.
Happy May Day. May Day, May Day. Next is Lawrence Gillerstad, who's at South Source. Some of you may have known him from WeWork or from his other prior lives. But good morning, Lawrence.
Good morning. Hope you guys are well. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great. And then finally, we have Janet Simpson, who's president of TVS Design, architectural firm based here in Atlanta that many of you know. Good morning, Janet.
Well, good morning and happy Friday to everyone. I think we're going to have a good discussion today.
Excellent. I want to thank Janet and Jesse and the other folks at TVS for pulling together this conversation before we get started. So, like we said, we're going to focus today on the road to reopening, which is when we planned this, we didn't know that Georgia would be at the forefront in the nation in terms of being one of the earliest to start opening things. It's obviously a situation that is not without controversy, both here in the state and even on a national basis. I even got an email from a friend in South Africa who wanted to know if I was going bowling last Friday. So Georgia is in the news and we're at the forefront of things, no matter how we feel about that. So there's obviously a lot of uncertainties in terms of how it's going to happen and how fast it's going to happen and what that all means for firms in AEC, real estate, and development. But amidst all of that uncertainty, the one thing we all do know is that we still have to run our businesses and make the best decisions that we can, even if the information is changing almost on a day-to-day basis. So next week, we're going to dig into the deeper long-term things, but we wanted to talk today specifically about the current realities that we're facing relative to the process of reopening. And we're going to talk about the business aspects of that, both for our clients, customers, and partners, as well as ourselves. But before we do that, I wanted to get into the practical realities that every business is facing that is at some point will be asking their employees to come back into their space. And that's the subject of what are the immediate implications for interiors. So we're going to start the conversation today. I want to call on Dawn. You've done a lot of research about this. You're a practicing interior designer. can you talk to us, can you start things off by telling us a little bit about where interiors were, what was going on in interiors pre-pandemic, and then what you're seeing as the immediate implications?
Sure. So I think it's important to note that we've occupied and been adapting offices and the open plan, sort of as we know it, since really the late 1930s, when Frank Lloyd Wright had designed his Jackson Wax headquarters. And that space was a large, ironically, open space full of desks, much like we see today. And it was very dynamic and also very loud. And so that led us to do a lot of enclosed spaces, which of course then was very static. And so much of what we see over the last really 20 to 25 years is really a focus on a hybrid approach. And really specifically in the last 10 years, we've really been focused on designing space that's flexible and agile, that enhances our experience while we're at work, really looks at optimizing performance and productivity, and trying to think through technology and how do we utilize that and how do we let that work through our space and give us that flexibility and agile work environment, especially as we've moved to team work and all the collaborative software that's been developed. We think about privacy a lot more now than we had previously. We think about visibility and noise levels, and we try to break up the spatial plans to mitigate the effects that that has on our well-being with stress and trying to focus our energy. And then that leaves me sort of kind of the last point that we have really focused on in interiors, which is well-being, right? So much of our concern today, we've spent a lot of time in over the decades looking at our physical well-being and ergonomics. But today we really have a more integrated, holistic approach to looking at our physical and mental well-being. And we study a lot of spaces to analyze sort of the effects of light and air quality or our activity levels and how that can really affect our cognitive function. And I think that our immediate challenge, given the current crisis with COVID-19, is controlling the disease transmission, which we know can occur through contact, whether it's direct or indirect, as well as inhalation. And so we need to evaluate the spaces that we occupy and consider how to maintain that recommended 6-foot spatial or physical distance, particularly as we look at our workstations and in our shared spaces of conference rooms or reception areas. We need to think about how to keep our indeterminate surfaces clean, right? Like our shared counters, any shared technology like keyboards, or even the simple coffee pot, right? And then the last piece is inhalation, which we need to think about our HVAC systems and really evaluate the supply and exchange and maybe the filtering of the air to determine if there are any additional measures that we can take to minimize our risk with these airborne contaminants.
So did I hear this right? I heard spatial proximity, I heard surfaces,
Yes.
and then air quality.
Yes.
Yeah. Janet, I know you all have had a project going on at TVS in terms of that was already happening before the situation came about in terms of redoing the interior for your offices. How has this affected that?
Well, this has really given us a great opportunity to completely rethink every baseline assumption we ever had about why we needed the office and what's the value of the office space really for TVS design. And I think as we figure that out for ourselves, it's going to have bigger implications for our clients. But the most immediate issues with bringing people back to the office, and for right now, we don't have a date certain that we have asked people to come back to the office. We're still all working remotely, is kind of to what Dawn was saying, keeping clean surfaces. Well, there's not readily available hand sanitizer and cleaners right now to be able to even do that on a regular basis once we bring people back. The 6-foot social distancing is so dramatic in so many different areas in the office. I mean, that's including just if you've got two people in the restroom at our office washing their hands at the same time, they're not 6 foot distance apart. I mean, there are a lot of issues with that, and the air quality is something that in a commercial office building, you really have very little control over what's coming through those systems. So I think there are some immediate problems, and I think the social distancing, as it eases, those go away, but the cleaning the surfaces and the air quality is going to be here for a while. And so we have a baseline for rethinking everything that we used to think that the value that the office brought to us, and that's long term. But in the short term, we're working from home while we figure it out.
And that's working for you?
It's working well. We just did a survey, and the majority of people in the firm are concerned about coming back to the office, and they feel highly productive at home. So as long as they're highly productive at home, and bringing them back to the office is going to be more of a disruption to that productivity because of all of the concerns that people have. There's no reason to bring them back.
Interesting. I'm interested in some of the other panelists in terms of what they're hearing from their colleagues relative to coming back.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, sorry, David, Paul, you and I talked about this yesterday. You know, one of the things I think is really interesting when you talk about work from home, and there's lots of speculation about where that's going to go, but you always hear it come back to the word productivity. And I know Dawn probably, you know, with all of her research and all the stuff she's done on it, probably can tell us maybe more than I believe is true, but I still haven't ever heard anybody figure out a way to measure that in a way that I think is real. And so I think when we talk about productivity, you know, you and I talked about the example yesterday in our business. It's a transactional business, the brokerage industry, and Gene will know this. Productivity is measurable. We don't get paid unless we do a transaction. And so I think anybody that's in our business would recognize that if one of us tried to work from home all the time and one of us was out doing meetings and walking through office buildings and going to networking events, the person that's out doing that stuff is going to likely outperform the person that's at home. And that's just the nature of the business. That's one business, and everybody's business is very different. But I do think we have to be careful when we talk about what productivity really means. And I think there's a higher likelihood sometimes, especially with sort of your salaried and bonus people, that when you ask them if they're productive at home, they may say yes. But measuring that and proving that is difficult. In some of the businesses where it is measurable productivity to pay, I think it's hard to justify that work from home is as productive.
Yeah, it seems like what I hear from people is that there are a lot of trade-offs. In some ways, you're more productive, and in other ways, you're missing out on a lot that you would get from being together in person, or the ability to meet with a customer or client. David, what were you about to say?
No, I mean, just to jump on what Lawrence was saying, I mean, business is so much relationship based that, I mean, getting out and doing some of that stuff is critical. And I mean, if you look at, like, just yesterday, we're going to be very soon to be under contract on an acquisition that we're looking at. And we need to get into the building. And yesterday, I think we had a group of 6 or 7 of us developers, 1 architect, and 3 brokers, you know, touring a property together. And there's a whole host of rules and regulations that we sent out ahead of time to talk about. Everyone's expected to wear a mask. We're going to do our best to stay 6 feet apart. We may have to take an elevator. We can only go 1 or 2 people, 3 people at a time. And there's a lot of protocol around what we were going to do. But it was interesting, even after that, you know, the response from most of the group was like, man, I really needed this. I needed to get out and look at a building again, or try to figure out how to move my business forward. I think if you look at, you know, last week, everyone was a big joke about bowling, and can't believe Kemp's visceral reaction to what Kemp was saying. And I've seen it with our tenants. I mean, this week it is different, and we'll get into some of that in a little bit. But I think people are starting to, whether it's pay cuts or the business is failing or whatever, I mean, or just natural, I need to go do something. I think people are starting to think forward to, and we're in this state of, we're going to be in this for another year or so. So we have to do something to move our businesses forward.
Yeah, yeah. Gene, I'm really interested in your opinion on this, because Constellation has built, you have established yourself as a cultural developer, and that you try and do development that actually creates community and intensifies community. And yet you've had this massive disruption where, that basically has pushed community apart. How are you seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, development historically is led by technology. I mean, even going back to the technology of a ship coming over to this continent to begin the development, or the development of agricultural systems to be able to grow food to go across the country, and then, concrete and steel and glass and all that. Today, we're talking about technology, as we call it, technology. So this call would be a good example of that. Mobile ordering apps and that type of thing. Really, though, at the end of the day, it's imperative that technology suits the people who are using the space. And Don was talking about early office examples. I believe some of the first offices were in London, office buildings in London, built for their Navy, so that they could have important documents and places to meet about these, pretty high profile and private types of events or plans. I think that's going to be interesting to see how that, plays out in the home. If you have a bunch of confidential documents laying around and whatnot, technology is going to have to play a big part in that. Relative to community, though, Constellations, which, by the way, it's our 2-year anniversary today. Very happy about that. Thank you. And it's been, for the last 6 weeks, there hasn't been anyone here except for me, our community coordinator, and a very OCD janitorial company, which we love. We've been paying attention to what this zeitgeist is, and community. You don't build community. You give people what they want and need, and then they build community. And so what we are really paying attention to is what the needs are of today, which is, health, hygiene, respect, empathy, compassion, care. And so we hired Matt Finn, who has a firm called Cognitive Design, which focuses on healthy design. And he put together for us a report called For Your Health. It's on his website. But basically what it does is we went through everything in the space and started to think about, what does this community want and need? So we went from the type of faucets that you would normally have to touchless. We, as Don was mentioning, we changed the air purification, not only in HVAC, but also bringing in air purifying plants. And then we created some kind of more, lower key, normal human type of things, like walking paths that allow us to get out and experience some fresh air. I think that those types of things, just paying attention to what people want and need, is going to continue to build community. It's happening online right now. We want to learn. We want to have these connections, hence this call. I also totally agree with what Lawrence was saying, and David. I mean, getting out there not only allows us to be productive, but it's what we want. It's human nature. We want to connect with other people. We also, though, want to be away from people. And that's kind of nice. And so the private office, I think, will come back to a large degree.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say too, on the sort of research related around productivity and trying to measure that. So it is very task oriented. So when we are looking at, productivity and how do you measure that, it is thinking about your cognitive function, and it is specific to tasks. So and thinking about the outcomes of whether it was very focused, like you're saying, in a private office where you had visual and acoustic privacy, or whether it was much more social, where you wanted to be more collaborative. And you see that come through in the more progressive offices today, where it's no longer just a several spaces where you have a workstation, an office, and a conference room. It's much more complex. And it's to that point you were saying, Jean, about supporting what the needs are. And so that research has looked at what the activities are and the best environment to support those activities, and then sort of creating an office to do that, right? Whether or not you're in the office or out of the office. And that's how, to both David and Lawrence's point about being out of the office, right? And that's what sort of yielded shared spaces. But it's really trying to look at that specifically and get much more articulate about what we are studying.
Excellent. So it's going to be a lot of challenges, huh? In terms of just being able to make things functional in a way that people are going to feel comfortable. But I'm also hearing from you all that there's a big pent-up desire for people to come back together again. And so the balance between, recreating that communal experience, but doing it in a way that the vast majority of people feel safe with is going to be a tricky road. So I want to turn now to the business side of things, and I want to start not with our own businesses, but but with our clients, our customers, and our business partners. Lawrence, we had an interesting conversation yesterday. You want to tell us what you're seeing with your clients, your tenants?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, it's still early, which is this is the perfect, sort of midpoint in our discussion to talk about this. And so I think when it comes to, I have clients on sort of the landlord and the tenant side, and both are sort of in the same boat, where I would say you've got about, 10%-ish of the tenants out there that are in some way mortally wounded. This has been, either it's the wrong time or the business was fragile to start, and they're really trying to figure out the easiest way to close down. And then you've got, sort of 10, maybe even a little higher than the bottom side, 10 to 20%. You've got some companies that are really, catapulting to the top. You got some folks that are, there's a business that we're dealing with in Atlanta that's got a prescription drug delivery service. It's like Instacart for prescription drugs, stuff like that, this couldn't be a better time for that business. And so you have some stuff that's jumping to the top. And then most people, quite frankly, are in the middle, that middle sort of 80%, where they're trying to figure out what the impact is going to be. And I think most landlords are in that boat. Ownership of real estate is a long-term investment for the most part. And so no one wants to panic, and no one needs to panic yet. But I think what, I talked to one of my clients, Sales Loft. Kyle Porter has been a personal friend and a client for a long time. And that business has been one of the fastest growing in Atlanta. And they sell sales enablement software. So basically helping people that sell online sell better. And so you think about something like that, and pre-COVID, you would say there's going to be more and more sales online. That business is just going to continue to grow. Some tech may come and go, but people are always going to need to be selling it. And the way that he looks at it is really, this is going to prove how sticky that stuff really is. This is his opportunity to prove to investors and prove to his customers that even in the downtimes, they look and they see where they're going to cut. And if they really keep this software, then that puts him in a better place than he was before, because he can say this isn't just an add-on, a nice to have. This is a must-have now. And so I think everybody that's in that middle portion is really going through that exercise in whatever way that works for them. They're trying to figure out, is this really gonna, stick? And I think they're relying on the stickiness of what they sell. They're relying on the strength of leadership, and they're relying on their relationships and partners, whether that's investors or lenders or salespeople. And I think that we're all going to sort of have to make sure that we're, doing the best we can in those areas. But that's what people are relying on, and nobody knows yet sort of where that middle portion is going to come out.
Yeah, and you're sort of the go-to guy on connecting early stage tech companies with space. Because of their origins? I mean, some of them, the proverbial started in the in the basement. Do they have a different idea about space than most other businesses?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think technology companies for a while, which we joke, it's certainly something that I've specialized in and focused in, but as Gene said earlier, technology is just driving everything more and more. And so I think almost all of us are in a tech business now. I bet everybody on this call has at least 3 or 4, software subscriptions that they rely on heavily. So we're all sort of in a tech business. But yeah, I mean, I do think those early stage companies that, have basically everything in the cloud, and they're very capable of taking their computer wherever they want to go and working from an iPad on the move. I certainly think that they're capable of avoiding some of this for longer, and it's easier for them. But you'll hear all these companies talk about the same thing too, is there's a lot of tech business. There's a lot of places that good talent can go. And it comes down to culture and community, like Gene's trying to build, whether you're building that in a co-working place or you're building that in an office. It really becomes, in the short term, it's easy to deal with. But if you talked about a new normal of having a tech company that has a culture and a community that's completely dispersed, I don't see that as being super viable.
Yeah. David, you've got a very different portfolio of tenants there. You want to talk about what you're seeing with them?
Yeah, I think we've got a wide range from your traditional office tenant down to maybe somebody that's more on the front line, with a restaurant direct to consumer. And I think an interesting poll that just popped up was the pay cut or layoff question. I think it looked like 45% or 50% of people are being impacted by that in some way. And so there's obviously a huge concern about health and safety, but similar security concern is providing for your family. And so, those things start to compete with one another, certainly. And so, if this question last week, so we're constantly talking to our tenants across the board about, or brokers in the market, what are your tenants? Because, everyone's having these conversations, and we're just trying to understand what is the sentiment of the people. And last week, the idea of opening back up. And I say that we actually do it. We had tenants that have been open, and I know businesses that have been open throughout this whole thing. It's just the majority haven't. But, that conversation about opening up was like, this is crazy. I can't believe we're even having this discussion, to now fast forward a week. And now I'm actually seeing, written reports from tenants as well as ourselves and others about how they're actually going to try to implement an opening. The opening may not be Monday. I know our company's going back May 11th, but it may not be Monday. It may not be a week from now, but some of them are saying, okay, I might open up in June. What are the things that I have to do to get open? And getting open is very different from every group. So, a restaurateur who literally has a month's worth of cash flow, who's completely changed their business to go and is now barely breaking even, but they're paying their employees, very hesitant to make any kind of change to go to opening and being open with 25% occupancy, because that completely changes their model. And now they've gone from, they went from making money to not making any money, to barely breaking even paying people, to going to 25%, and they think they'll be losing money. So they're very hesitant. But then we've got other tenants who maybe have gotten a PPP loan or something else that is helping give a little bit of slack in cash flow, or larger, more capitalized tenants who have the bandwidth to be able to say, okay, we can go experiment some things, because we're thinking about the next 5-10 years of our business, certainly the next year of our business, while we'll be in this new normal state. And we need to be open so we can experiment for the next couple months to figure out what the best course of action is. And so we're seeing that kind of on the restaurant front, and then others will be watching those restaurants willing to experiment to say, okay, if I'm the smaller guy, how do I follow in suit? And then on the office front, I think it gets back to maybe that poll or others, and then I think on the office front, we've got buildings where it's different in terms of the design of the building. So if you're a one-story building, you get out of your car and you walk straight into your office, and you're in, and I'll coin this survivor term, trust cluster. So if your employees have all gotten these deep, written reports from your C-level executives saying, here's all the things you have to do, and you have to tell us if you're sick. And so now you're in this trusted community. So you walk from your car, you go straight into your office, and you're in what is kind of a trusted community. You feel better about that. But if you have to go through 8 points of entry and up an elevator and all these other things, there's a different kind of feeling from tenants. And so I think it depends on the company, their cash flow, what's happening, people's personalities, and the type of building that you have.
Yeah, no, I think we're going to have a lot of fun next week, or it's going to be really interesting next week talking about the long-term implications of those things in terms of spaces. We got a question in for you, David, from Catherine Hutchins, I think. At Summer Hill, you seem to have the perfect setup to allow all restaurants to have outdoor seating on patios and or sidewalks. Has the city weighed in on this at all? Open container, social distancing on the sidewalks?
Yeah, thank you for a setup question from a colleague at Carter. Wow. Yeah, geez. No, I mean, we don't have an open container. We haven't had weighed in on that yet. However, we have had tenants, Woods Chapel Barbecue would be an example of this, who's received some money. They wouldn't have been able to really open in a 25% capacity, but given the fact that they have a 5,000 square foot patio, there's a lot more interest we're hearing from our tenants, at least, and the few that we have on Georgia Avenue, that, well, I could have a portion of the tenants on the interior, but we can also have a lot more people seem to be interested or willing to walk up, make an order, and sit outside, just because of all the comments that we just heard about recirculating air and the HVAC system. And so, and the weather's been beautiful outside, so I think that helps as well.
Yeah, Atlanta in May is different than Minneapolis in January,
Yeah, exactly.
So, Janet, as an architectural firm, you have a very different set of clients, and it's very project oriented. What are you seeing from your clients, and what's happening with projects that you had either that were already underway or that were in the pipeline for pitch?
Well, we're in all commercial architecture and interior design, and a lot of different building types in there. But really to date, we've only had about 10% of the projects go on hold. Not really going away, but just going on hold. And they were on hold for really funding reasons. It was about clients feeling like they needed to put a pause on something while we figured out the situation before they had a lot of money going out, and some concerns about financing the projects. So it was really about the money flow to the projects more than that there was a need for the project. It wasn't that people were thinking they didn't want to do it. So that was one of the considerations from our clients. And one of the things that we've been really trying to do is understand from their perspective, what are the things that they're having to face. And what we're trying to figure out with a lot of clients is touchless entry points, whether it's in a new office building or a hotel or any of these. We specialize in people and places that bring people together. And we specialize in all of those environments that do that. And so suddenly the whole dynamic is about just a little bit like what David was talking about. It's one thing once you get into your space of people, but how do you get people to and from and not feel like that? So we're spending a lot of time with touchless entry points right now.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing, that we're seeing with our tenants that I didn't mention is tenants that haven't started construction. Tenants that are under construction continue to roll. The tenants that hadn't started construction and this build out is going to be a heavy cost to them that we knew going in they're putting a lot into this. Most, if not all of them, have hit pause to say, we especially restaurants, we don't know when are we going to be open at full capacity? And then the ones that are confident to go forward are actually doing redesign of their space to just take this into account.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's everybody else seeing in terms of projects? Is that the general consensus, that things that are already in the pipeline are maybe moving more slowly, but they're still moving along, but there may be an air bubble in that pipeline coming up?
Well, we have 4 active development projects going on at the moment. And it was somewhat shocking to me that they were all allowed to continue to go on. And so one of our challenges is during all this is keeping up with all the work. we've made changes and, kind of called some audibles on things that we're all talking about today, which is, being considerate of the people who are there, not just today, but in the future. And so doing that through design. Also, we've been, relying on the foundations of this business in terms of legal and accounting to understand what's going on. So my father always said, have a good lawyer, have a good accountant. We've been working with a guy named Daryl Moss at Wiseman for forever. I talk to Daryl probably once a week to try to understand what's going on legally so that we can help to, make sure that people are protected, that we're protected, that our clients are protected. Our CPA happens to be David's brother. So Jason at Fraser and Dieter, talk to him, what you can do in development has a lot to do with what you can get financed. And with the, what's going to happen with tenants and who's going to be able to pay and who's not, it's important to understand what some of the implications from the different legislation that's been passed lately, how does that filter down to taxes, depreciation, and other things. And so those are really the other parts of this that I think are important to pay attention to.
Yeah. So when you say what you can get financed depends on what you're developing, what do you mean by that?
Well, banks like to know that they're going to get paid back, and they like to know that the borrower can, weather the storm. And so if you're doing something that's more speculative, let's say, for one, and by the way, so our firm does brokerage, we help people buy, sell, and lease. We also develop for our own behalf, on behalf of others. So in a fee development situation, let's say, where we're going to be doing a development on behalf of someone, part of our role is working with lenders. They want to know, is this project going to work? And it's really hard to tell right now because the underwriting for these projects is based upon projections of what people are willing to pay for rent. What will someone pay for a restaurant space moving forward, office, an apartment, and what have you, and it's so hard to tell. So, I don't think that anyone is like stopping, but I think more along the lines of what Janet's saying, and really everyone here is take time, think about it. There's no, rule that says we have to jump into anything immediately. So I think like once you're going on a development project, you really have to keep going. But do so with some perspective and some caution.
Has the definition, and this is for everybody, has the definition of what is speculative or more speculative, has that changed?
I don't know if the definition of speculative changes. I think the appetite for speculation changes, is probably the best way to put it. But I think that what we're dealing with across product types, and I know David and Gina, who are really, really good at what they do, have already been thinking through this. But I think what we're all looking for to a certain degree is there will be some demand for space in all verticals. And what we're trying to figure out is what is the gap between what exists today and what the demand will need to be for the future. And how big is that gap? Is that gap small enough to where it's just adding some plexiglass and some tape to your office building to tell people to stay away from each other? If that gap is it, if it's $6 for tape, then we're all okay. If it's $100 a foot for a new, air system that has UV lighting in every funnel and sucks all the virus out and all that kind of stuff, then we're in a different world. And so that's what we're all really waiting to see is how big is that gap? And then at what stage can you start to make that jump? Because there will be people that were speculative before that will be very successful because they have time to incorporate a big jump if there is a big jump. If the jump isn't as big, then you'll have a lot of folks that have projects going on right now that can just make modifications and compete. And that's what we're all waiting to see.
Yeah, and that's what Janet was talking about too, with this opportunity and this creative opportunity to take the time and see what, the TVS office and then subsequently offices of the clients, will look like. What Lawrence said, I think is right on. And the there's the speculation in like investment real estate, and then there's also the speculation in our own, spaces.
Yeah.
I think that it's really that great opportunity. Usually we persevere and find a way to do things that are really precious to us. And right now, what is precious that we can't really do is that congregating with people in a way that fear factor isn't there. Because we've all said we really benefit from being together, but it's so difficult with especially the 6-foot social distancing. But we will find a way to figure out how to be together. But there are other things about the built environment that we've just put up with to begin with. And I think that those are the types of things that you're going to start to see some changes. So is it easier, to have some touchless environments anyway to get from your car up to your office space? Well, sure, easy wins. Basic needs win. And so I think that it's at the end of the day, it's really just going to be that moment where because your ROI on it is now maybe more dependent on that than it was. That's what motivates that change.
Yeah.
And after that, I was going to add. So I've been talking with friends and experts on sustainability, and many of the more progressive properties that already sought some of the things that we want now, right, with air quality and light and filtration. And so your LEED projects, your WELL projects, those properties that are certified, people are now really recognizing the importance of that, or at least they're more aware of it, right? And there's a greater understanding. And so they're seeing maybe a renewed interest in these types of strategies. Maybe not necessarily certification, but at least the different strategies that people can utilize to address the current concerns.
Yeah, and all the prognostications that are out there, you see a lot of commentary that says the main impact of this, not just in our industries, but in society, is that some of the big trends that were already underway are gonna be accelerated significantly. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're gonna have so much fun next week talking about all that, because I think the trends are significant, and there are some places. I was on an analyst call the other day, consumer product call, that said basically this has accelerated Amazon's food delivery business by 3 years. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of things, and I think those kind of dynamics are going to be true with how people relate to the built environment. I want to switch quickly because we're running through this hour really quickly. But I wanted to be sure that we talked about how we're managing our own firms. We just talked about our clients and our tenants and our customers. Janet, I know you've given a lot of thought to this. And we've had lots of conversations about it. You want to share how you all have approached managing the short term there?
Yeah, we had an existing strategic plan for the firm in place. And when this came in as a total disruption, we put together a COVID-19 response plan. And it really has 5 guiding principles to it that says these are the priorities we're trying to preserve. And the number one thing was serve our clients and understand what they were going through and pay attention to how we could help them. We had principles in there about really being business people and acting as business people, focusing on what matters the most to stabilize the business, sticking together as a team, and bringing joy to every conversation, bringing our optimism. But the key actions that we were focused on was kind of a phased approach to your urgent priorities, of course, was to make sure that people were healthy and safe and establishing that baseline. So March 13th was the last day all of us were in the office together. We've been out for a long time. Once we had all that baseline urgent priorities taken care of, it gave us the ability to start to focus on preparing for the new reality to come, which is what we're talking about today. What do we do with our office space? And how I feel about that as a designer versus how I feel about that as a leader that's responsible for people and making decisions that really impact them. are slightly different. I'm more optimistic on the design side when it comes to telling people they have to come into the office and risk their health, and I can't provide as good of environment for them in the office as they have at home. Those are different things that you're dealing with. So we're really looking at how we're going to prepare for the new reality to come, both as business and as designers. But our key strategic conclusions is kind of the next phase that we're going into now, to look at what types of opportunities do we have to accelerate our strategic plan to help our clients to really start to understand how the built environment's going to change. And then we have those opportunities to accelerate. And I think that that's what people are saying within every environment. There are opportunities here to accelerate the things that you had going that were good anyway. So those are kind of the principles and the key actions that we're doing right now as a firm. And it's exciting, but it's also, we are balancing very much the reality of our current situation and trying to not let that temper and inform too much that this is still just a moment in time and things are rapidly changing.
That's with a 50-year-old design firm or design and architecture firm. Lawrence, you've got a 2-month-old business on your hands. What's it like managing a business that young?
Yeah, we only need, with everybody together, I think we only need about 18 feet, I guess is the rule. So since there's just 3 of us, so it's not as hard to manage on my side, square footage wise. But no, we're facing similar challenges. In some ways, it's a really, really positive thing for me from a business standpoint, that I don't have a whole lot of overhead. There's not a lot of stuff invested in a business direction. And so pivoting the business plan has been, super easy. It's as fluid as we need it to be. And so one of the areas is that there's tons and tons of demand from landlords thinking about, how am I going to market space in this new environment? What kind of things am I going to have to do to change my space? What do I do with all these current tenants? I'm having more conversations with current tenants than I ever had before. And so we've really pivoted to focus a lot more on that landlord side of the business, which is a new part of the business for me. So there's been some strategic decisions we've made. And then personally, I've got 2 young brokers who are both under 30, who are both coming 100% commission to work for me. And so it's been a lot of maintaining, a caring relationship with them and just telling them, hey, listen, this is totally unexpected. There was some things we were going to invest in that we don't have to invest in, and you don't have to worry. We'll take care of you for the next 12 to 18 months. And so, don't focus in these next 2 to 3 months on all the negatives, focus on the long term. And so it's really been giving them that short-term confidence that they can go and focus on long-term goals. And so we're handling that and moving through it, and, feel really, really good about where we are.
Yeah, that's interesting. David, Carter's a big operation. What's the strategy there?
Yeah, so I mean, if we just take it from the standpoint of reopening and coming back into the office, I think there's 2 things that we're really focused on. Is one, like communicating expectations and having an actual plan that everyone's following, so that there's some regulation around what we're doing. And then 2, just flexibility. So there are a lot of different people, and everyone has different issues. Some people have high risk, immune systems themselves maybe, or deficiencies, or have family members that have issues, and so are thinking about themselves from that perspective. So there needs to be flexibility around that, or there's just concern or fear. But then there are also others ready to get back into the office. I think we're fortunate in we have 3 different offices across the city at Met in Summerhill, and then also one in Dutch Valley on the east side of Piedmont Park. All of them are, walk-in. Really, I mean, I think our only one at Dutch Valley, we hit 1 public kind of combined, shared door before we get to our space. And so there's been that. So most of our focus has been just our own office and what do we do? And oddly enough, our office is kind of set up where we're not 100-ish plus a square feet per person lined up, like a call center where we've got separate cubicles or offices or whatever. So people are able to kind of get away from each other in the office. And so then what do we do with other spaces? Like no one's allowed to use the kitchen, and well, we can't get hand sanitizer, so we need to be able to use the sink. And so there's just like iterations of everyone kind of, taking all the things Dawn was talking about and other, OSHA guidelines and everything else. And then, so we have all of that, and then we'll have regulations and rules around tours. So we did a tour yesterday and, sent out a note to everyone, please wear a mask, please do that. I mean, so just as long as everyone comes in with the same expectation, there isn't like an awkward situation where it's like, are you going to wear a mask or am I not going to wear it? It's just kind of, this is what we're going to do. Everyone's doing it. And there's some confidence around doing that.
How about the short-term business strategy at Carter? Is that shifted, or has it just been put on pause, or what's going on in terms of, your overall?
So business strategy, I mean, certainly, this makes you we obviously did business planning at the end of last year, and then this happens and you have to take a look at your overall strategy. And one is managing and shoring up everything that's in the house, right? And so that's all of our existing relationships, all of our existing tenants, and the existing projects. And so there's a incredible focus on that over, say, the last month and a half, 2 months. Now it's okay, well, what about our strategy from that we were planning to go implement with new projects has changed? I mean, we were going to sell a project to a hotel developer. That's not happening. Okay, so I mean, what is changing, and what do we need to look at, and what are the opportunities going forward, and how do we structure our business if we assume that this is going to be a year to 18 months of slowness or whatever, that when we come out of it, and we've been around 60 years, we have decades of issues of things like this that have happened before, where if we can shore up our company and be in a great position to take advantage of those opportunities in the future, that's kind of what we're doing. And then there are obvious opportunities in front of us right now that where there may be some distress that we can make a move on.
Yeah, we've had a couple comments in the chat and a question about, what are the opportunities in all of this, and the idea that innovation comes out of, adversity. So, which I think is going to be a big theme in our conversation next week.
Yeah.
Team, what about you? What in terms of business strategy for Constellations, what changes did you have to make?
Sure. In Constellations, it's definitely a source of pride as this cultural center and culturally based workspace. It's a part of our business, and we have done planning around that. And we spent a considerable amount of time there with Gene Kansas Commercial Real Estate, and I have a degree in entrepreneurship, so I've been writing business plans for like 25 years. And kind of what David's saying, like, you can have a plan, but then something, or maybe the world changes and the plan has to change. I think, though, what's really important is what Janet was talking about, which are the guiding principles, and kind of being, more on this cultural side. In our planning in December, kind of taking, stock of 2019, looking into 2020, we decided to do group therapy, really get in touch with like ourselves and the human side, which ended up being a great thing. And we came away from that workshop with guiding principles. There's a fundamental principle of our firm, which is to demonstrate what's possible. That's been there since day one. The guiding principles for this company, though, overall, are to take pride in ownership, which I think like people are really embracing right now, kind of worldwide. Like, I have to do this. We have serious responsibilities. I care. To build upon our history, not just like company history, talking about Atlanta history. We do a lot in historic preservation. And then to create meaningful connections. And so those, even though everything's changed, have remained the same. And then we have what we have called some guiding stars, which came out of that workshop, which are about creativity and joy and balance and care. And so we've basically taken the business plan and had to totally, redo that part of it, keeping the guiding principles though. And it's really helped, astutely guide us. So that's been good.
Yeah, I've heard the quote several times from the famous Mike Tyson quote about everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Well, one of my favorite leaders, and I think this is a question about leadership, is General Russell Honore, the 4-star general that came down to New Orleans after Katrina. And he talks exclusively about a culture of preparedness. And it's the, if you stay ready, you'll be ready type of a thing. I haven't been punched in the mouth in a while, but I guess I'm ready for that.
We're about to close up, but I wanted to get to at least one question. We got, where is it? I'm having to learn how to do all this stuff. This is from Walter Bell. It says and Dawn, this is specifically for you. The current guidelines for COVID-19 is 6-foot distancing. How can changes in that standard or a future viruses be incorporated into design? I think that's a great question for you, because talk about what your husband does and the different things that he has to deal with because of the scope of his work.
Yeah, so my husband is at Kimberly-Clark, is based in engineering, but now he's doing global project delivery, and they've been sort of looking at this globally and really trying to answer all the different variations that you see. And then down that same vein, I've been looking at a lot of ASHRAE standards. It's not my specialty or area of expertise, but really trying to understand why the 6-foot distancing has been put in place. And I recommend anyone who's interested in that can go look. So ASHRAE, which is our standing association, sort of helps us understand research with our air quality, or one of them, really has, they have a published position document on infectious disease. And it's important to note that it was adopted in 2014 and then reaffirmed in February of 2020 this year. And it's basically really experts who've analyzed infectious disease, and they're looking at not just the COVID-19 situation, but also or the ones that we've faced before, right? SARS, MERS, the ones that the H1N1, and they're really sort of bridging with the healthcare professionals and trying to understand how disease is spread through the air. And they have a really lovely diagram that shows the difference in how droplets, and their weight and the size, and they're really analyzing all those pieces. And I think that the 6-foot distancing is they recommend a 1 to 2 meter distancing. And Europe, the WHO, for example, has recommended 1 meter. We have recommended 2 meters, but that's a range, and it seems fairly good, and it has withstand many other infectious diseases. And I think we'll see that stay the same and be consistent. I'm not sure that they're going to increase that in the near term. Sorry.
Anybody else want to talk about 6 feet?
Actually, I'll be really curious to see what happens when we have a vaccine. We're making big plans, and especially in the world of architecture, the plan is supremely important to what you'll build. I think it's important to have the flexibility that Janet and Dawn are talking about. I don't know, though, once we have a vaccine, if people are going to be caring as much about 6 feet. I mean, I was out at a development project that we had, I don't know, like 2 weeks ago, when we were having folks from the city repair a sewer line. And there were, like, of course, 8 people standing around the sewer, like 2 inches from each other. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with that. I think it's important to think ahead, again, be prepared. I don't think long term, though, we're going to be thinking as much about 6-foot distance.
Yeah.
No, the 6 feet is really trying to get at thinking, like I said, we have the influenza, and we do lose a significant number of people every year from influenza. And I think people are going to be more sensitive to that moving forward. Even if we do find a vaccine for COVID, we've yet to find a vaccine for influenza. And so I think people are just going to be more aware of that. And it won't impact us, as you're saying, the majority of us, but I think maybe some are going to be much more aware of that.
Agreed.
So our hour has gone by very quickly, and there are several references here to the long term, which is what we're going to be talking about next week. I want to thank all of you for coming in today. I want to thank everybody, all the participants out there, and we would love for you to come back. We think the best conversation is yet to come next Friday at the same time. If you have questions about the long-term implications or what you think the big changes will be in how architecture, design, construction, development, real estate, what we build and how we build it, please, I'm going to put him on the line. Please send an email to Jesse Altman at TVS. That'sjaltman at tvs.com. And
TVSdesign.com.
tvsdesign.com. Thank you, Jesse. Or you can chat if it's on your mind right now. Go ahead and throw it in the chat section or the Q&A section here, and we'll have it. But we'd love to get your questions in advance, so to make sure that we're really zeroing in on those things that are most interesting to you. So thanks everyone for a great conversation, and we will see you next week.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks.
Bye.